I want to share with you an amazing story that happened to me the other week. We were on a family road trip, a 4-day trip through the Midwest. On day 2 of the trip, we started in Indiana. The plan was to go around Lake Michigan, up through Chicago, and then stop in Milwaukee to visit some family that we have up there. We're on our journey, we're on our trip, we're driving through Chicago, and of course, what do you do when you're in Chicago? You stop to get some kosher pizza. So we Googled some pizza shop, found a good kosher pizza shop, stopped there, had a late lunch, and it was amazing. I turned to my wife and my son who was with us. I excused myself for a minute. I said, I had to take care of some work, some emails. I ran to the car. I brought in back to the pizza shop. I brought my computer back into the pizza shop, took care of a couple of things, 10 minutes, wrapped things up, went on continued our journey, got to Milwaukee an hour and a half or so later. And I turned to my son, Benny, I say, hey, on our way into the house, can you go grab the computer and bring it with you? And he said, I don't have the computer. I turned to my wife, I said, honey, do you have the computer? Can you bring it in? She says, I don't have the computer. I thought you had the computer. I said, I don't have the computer. Maybe I stuck it in the trunk. We go to the trunk of the car. It's not there. I don't have the computer with me. Now, I don't know about you, but if I don't have my computer, the world comes to an end. My life revolves on my computer. I take care of so many things on my laptop. If I don't have my computer, it is such a nightmare. Now, yes, everything is backed up in the cloud, but it would be such a hassle, such a headache to get a new computer, upload everything. It would take forever, and it would be a real disruption of my life. And number two, it's really expensive. That's an expensive piece of equipment. So I decided, look, let me call the pizza shop out in Chicago. I gave him a call. I said, hey, we were there an hour and a half ago. I think I left my computer in your pizza shop. Fellow answers the phone. He says, you did. As a matter of fact, he says, as soon as we left the pizza shop, he saw that I left my computer. He ran out to try to catch me in the street, but I didn't notice him. So the computer is in the pizza shop. Some fellow in Chicago. Now, I'm not from Chicago. I don't know very many people in Chicago. So we spent the next little bit, made a couple of phone calls, made a couple of arrangements, and what ended up happening was a fellow named Jake, who worked in the pizza shop, he gave the computer to some guy named Yossi, who delivered it to some other fellow, a rabbi who lived in Chicago, who was going to be traveling to Milwaukee first thing in the morning the following day. And that's what happened. Mr. A gives it to Mr. B, who gives it to Mr. C, this rabbi who I met at the local shul in Milwaukee. He had my computer, and terrific. I was reunited with my lost computer. There's an amazing, amazing lesson that I recently came across. We know the story. The Torah tells us is right as the Jews are leaving Egypt, right at the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, right as they're on the cusp of leaving Mitzrayim, of leaving Egypt, the verse tells us, "Hashem nosan eschena am b'nei Mitzrayim vayashilum," that the Jewish people, they found favor in the eyes of the Egyptians, vayashilum. They took a lot. The Egyptians loaded them up with all sorts of money and silver and gold, and they got the chen ha'am. They found favor in the eyes of the Egyptians. And the question is why do they find favor in the eyes of the Egyptian? What was it? So the great Maharshal, classic commentaries, writing in the 1600s, writing on Rashi's Pirush, Rashi's commentary, he explains that what happened was, through a whole series of events, the Egyptians recognized, remember the story, Makas Choshech, the 9th plague was the plague of darkness. And the Egyptians, through a series of events, right when the Jews were about to leave Mitzrayim, to leave Egypt, the Egyptians, the Mitzrayim, recognized that during the Makas Choshech, during the plague of darkness, if you think about it, the Jews were able to see, and the Jews were able to locate all of the wealth of the Egyptians. They were able to spy, as it were, and reconnoiter all of the hiding places where the Egyptians stored all their money and their jewelry and their diamonds and precious materials. And the Egyptians recognized that despite the fact that the Egyptians were helpless, they couldn't see the Jews, they didn't even know that the Jews were there finding all these hiding places, and yet the Jews didn't take a thing. The Jews had every opportunity to steal from the Egyptians, and by the way, it really wouldn't have been theft, because the Egyptians really owed the Jews for all the labor and the slave labor. They really had a requirement to pay the Jews, and yet the Jews didn't take what they rightfully could have and should have easily, and the Jews didn't want to take anything. When the Egyptians realized, right after Makas Bachoros, right at the cusp of the Exodus, and they realized that the Jews had the opportunity to take all of their possessions, yet they didn't. That's why the pasuk says, that's why the verse says that the Jews found favor in the eyes of the Egyptians. The Egyptians saw just how upstanding, just how much integrity the Jewish people had, and that's why they find favor in the eyes of the Egyptians, and that's why they're going to load them up and just say, "Hey, take all of our possessions, take all of our money, just get out of here." That's what inspired the Egyptians to find favor, to see the Jews in a favorable light. And it's such a beautiful lesson. When we act with integrity, when we act with honesty, people recognize it. And it's really, really inspiring. And I was thinking about this story, this episode that happened to me with the pizza shop and the computer and all of that. And I was thinking, imagine the story in a different context. Imagine I was just some regular guy. Imagine I wasn't Jewish and I'm some random guy starting out in Indiana, drive through Chicago, and I leave my computer at a Pizza Hut or at a Domino's Pizza. And I figure it out an hour and a half later when I'm in Milwaukee, and I realize, oh my goodness, I left my computer at some pizza at a Pizza Hut in Chicago. There is no chance that I ever see my computer ever again. I would never ever see it again. Yet, because I knew I stopped at a kosher pizza shop, and I knew that the people there, they were Jewish, and as I never met them, I don't even know who they are, but I knew the second the fellow answered that phone, I knew once he told me that he had my computer, I knew I was going to get it back. I knew someone would give it to someone who'd give it to a third person. I was assured, I knew with total certainty, I was going to get it back because that's how Jewish people are. The mitzvah of Hashavas Haveda, returning lost objects, I knew they weren't going to hold on to something that wasn't theirs. Mi ka'amcha Yisrael, who's like the Jewish people who act with such integrity? We talk about the mitzvahs, and of course the mitzvahs, we do the mitzvahs, we avoid what's wrong, and we do what's right. Of course, we're investing in our neshamas, we're investing in our eternity of our souls. Of course, that's true. Schar, onesh, reward and punishment. When we do mitzvahs, of course, God showers so much in blessing and reward for us. But on a deeper level, when we talk about doing a mitzvah, it makes us such holy people. Kadshenu b'mitzvasecha. When we do mitzvahs, we become people of holiness. We become people of such integrity. And when we see that, it is so inspiring. And I had that moment of just such inspiration. I was so proud to be a Jew that I left my computer in middle of nowhere. Guy doesn't know who I am. And it went from one guy to a next guy to a third guy, Milwaukee, Chicago, and I got my computer back. And it made such a difference in my life. We talk about doing the mitzvahs. We talk about having integrity. Let's remember, when we do mitzvahs, of course, we're investing in our souls, but it makes us such people of integrity. And when we do that, everyone around us gets so inspired.